Good morning. It's a little after 10. Yeah, decided to have a slow start today. Um, well, you can't really see what's going on here because it's all black on black on black, right? But there's a bunch of car parts here. Um, I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to get a huge amount of stuff done today. Um, I'm going to do a few things on the car, but not a whole lot because, to be honest, I'm really not feeling terribly well today. Um, not really sick, but just tired and achy. There's like one weather system coming through after the other. So I'm going to digress because usually I like to use up a lot of time before I start doing anything. And since I'm not really planning to do terribly much today, I'm going to use up some time talking about um, getting achy when the weather changes. So I know that that's kind of considered to be a myth, right? Because people say, I can feel it in my bones. Well, actually, I think that's true. There haven't been very many real scientific studies of this, and it's hard to do it. You can't do really unless you've got a gigantic hyperbaric chamber and a whole bunch of people who feel like sitting around inside of one. Um, I don't know, reading books or playing games or something to keep them occupied so they don't get psychosomatic reactions. And then what you'd have to do is you'd have this gigantic pressure chamber basically that lets you change the pressure inside up and down. And you'd put a bunch of people in there and you'd have them just be doing stuff. And then you'd increase the pressure you'd have to do a whole bunch of different kinds of things. You'd have to increase the pressure slowly. You'd have to increase the pressure quickly. What you want to do is you want to simulate what happens when weather fronts move through and you get like 30 or 40 millibars of mercury equivalent changes in air pressure really quickly or slowly, but usually fairly quickly. Um, so what you probably want to do is you'd want to study um, weather weather changes in reality, especially those where you get anecdotal reports of, oh yeah, that really it's really achy when that happens. Um, so you'd put these people in there and you'd have them like every 30 seconds or so rate their pain level, their achiness level on a 1 to 10 scale. I'm just making that up, but that's what you could probably do. And then you'd systematically change the pressure in the chamber. Um, and it makes sense you'd have a big one with more people in it because in reality, if you just had one person in a hyperbaric chamber, that's not really a realistic situation. People are in like offices or grocery stores or with family or something. Not everybody. There are people who are alone. That happens. Um, but yeah, so you do that, and you change the air pressure, and then people would record their achiness level, and you'd check to see if there's a consistent relationship between the achiness and the amount of and speed at which the air pressure changes. I guess, the amount being in the direction as well, whether it's going up or down. And if you did that with enough people, enough different times, then you'd find out if there's a relationship or not. Um, and maybe even, since unless people are carrying barometers with them, there might be a couple people cheating. It might have a barometer on their smart wrist thing or whatever. Um, they might have that, but mostly they wouldn't be cheat. Maybe even their phone. I don't know. Phones nowadays they might have the equivalent of a barometer, so you can tell what altitude you're at, as long as you corrected for the ambient air pressure. Anyway, I use that word. So I shouldn't say that, but so you'd do that, and then you'd find out if there's a relationship, a strong or weak relationship between changes in air pressure and achiness. But from my own experience, I can tell you that, and other people in the family with whom I chat about it, there seems to be a relationship between high pressure, okay, the air pressure going up, which is associated usually with like clear weather and not stormy stuff. That's what the usual association, and that tends to be when we feel the most achy is when the air pressure is going up. Um, but that's I'm feeling achy today. How much time have I used up? Really? It was like 5.5 minutes. Well, so I have all these parts painted black here, and a lot of them require I'm using silver paint because the metallic chrome paint I have doesn't adhere that well to the spray paint. There are like on these chairs, the seats. Okay? On the seats, I don't know if you can see this very well, but there's a ridge here. Okay, and that ridge is actually on the real car, um, chromed. And then there's on this side is what appears to be a lever for um, adjusting the seat, and that's supposed to be chromed as well. How can that be? Well, there's I'm not going to paint those today because I'm just not feeling focused enough to do that kind of detail painting. But I can do other things like when I examine this, these were spray painted multiple times. There's spots where the paint didn't get was from the bottom, and it's very unlikely to be able to see those when it's assembled. But I have some closely matching to the spray paint over here that I can use to do some touching up. So I can do that because I can do that without really hurting anything. That's one thing I'm going to do today is do the touching up on the seats. There's little white specks on everything. The other thing I can do today, this is the radiator, is I can assemble the parts of the radiator. This goes that's tape on there that got painted, spray painted black. Is this is not too difficult, I think. I can attach that. That would be a thing I could do today. Attach that. The radiator cap is here. That needs to be painted a metallic color, and I can probably do that. Looks like there's a little spot that's not painted well. See how that goes. This is the tire cover, and this is the shelf on which the tire cover goes, like that. That looks like the kind of thing I can do today. That's the kind of assembly I could make happen without hurting anything. And this is the body of the car. There's a lot of stuff in here that needs work. The door handles, actually the panel on which the door handles and the window crank. We should talk about window cranks. You don't know what those are anymore. And the edges of the pedal and the pedal sprockets. Those really should be painted with the silver paint. I have to look at the pictures of the interior. I'm not sure if the surround, if there's a, I don't know if there's a metallic trim. It's really hard for you to see. It's all black on black, and the contrast is not very good on the camera there. but there's some trim around this that maybe needs to be metallic. I'm not sure. But that's the thing I can do. I'm going to spend some time talking about the things that I might do today. That doesn't mean I'm going to do them. It's just that I can talk about maybe doing something. So these are the insides of the insides of the wheels. The black part is the outside, and this bit here matches up with the equivalent part on a chromed part. And if I'm feeling really ambitious, what I could do is I could find the chromed wheels, the outside, and maybe put the wheels together inside the tires. Maybe put the cardboard aside. So there's a bunch of things I can do here that involve touching up with some black paint, a little bit of assembly on here. Actually, I could put this in. This goes back here like this. That looks like something I can do, doesn't it? You know, I could do that, and then I could put the tire on there like that. You can't really, you can barely see it with black on the black. So that's the thing. I could do this. I could put those on. Those aren't going to be in the way of anything else on it that needs to be done on here. All the rest is up here. So I could do a little bit of assembly. That would be a thing. Here and here and here and here and here. Some touching up on the seats. Maybe some assembly on the wheels. Maybe. I'm just going to leave these parts here. They contrast nicely with the white paper towel, at least. In here, there's two parts. Okay, one, and I screwed this up anyway, so it's probably just as well. Put a mask across the front of this. This is the tachometer pod. Okay, and I didn't want to paint it black. I wanted the pod. I want to hand paint all of that so that the dials are more or less accurate compared to the real car. So this probably could have been chromed, but it wasn't. The radio and the speedometer are chromed, and they shouldn't be. I'll talk about that too. There's a whole bunch of there's the parts on the inside of the car that should have been chromed haven't been, and then there are parts that probably shouldn't be chromed that are. So that's something else I can go on and on about um, in a while. But the thing is, and it looks better than I know when I inspected this before. Yeah, okay, it's still there. This was very badly molded. This piece. Okay, this is just one solid chunk of injection molded plastic, and there was a divot on the top of it, a significant hole. I mean, an indentation that I filled in, and I thought I had got it pretty well filled in, but when I primed it, if you get the light just right on it, you can still see that it's there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little more filler on that. Yeah, here you can see it if you turn it. That's what I was seeing. I don't know if you can, you probably can't see it. A little bit more filler on that. Let that cure, sand it again, reprime it. I need to prime the face of this as well. Okay. And then put that piece of tape across the face after it's primed, not like I did this time. So this would have to be reprimed to cover the face and the dials and things anyway. Um, and so I can do that after I put the filler in and sand that down, which will be a little time in the future. And then this part here is going to be painted black, but I want this part, it's the crossbar that goes across the engine bay. Well, it goes in the back of the engine bay. I'm going to make this actually kind of glossy. Okay, I want this to be somewhat glossy, and so I've got some slightly glossier than this paint. So one thing has turned out okay is that the black paint that I've got, the inside is like leatherette. There's just enough gloss on the black spray paint that I've been using. Why is there a spot there? Just a little dust. Has just enough gloss that it's just about right. And for the parts that aren't glossy, like the radiator and the bottom of the car, I've got this flat clear coat, and I put that on parts like this, and you can kind of see the difference in gloss or lack thereof. That was kind of a happy accident that one paint works that with a clear coat as opposed to having to try to find a black paint with a different gloss to it. Well, there, I've got a bunch of stuff to do, and I guess I can start doing it. Um, so what think I'm going to start with a little bit of assembly. I'm going to put the radiator together and put this stuff together here. Move these wheels out of the way. And then I'm going to do some black touching up on the seats with some black paint. Um, but first, I'm gonna forget about this until it's too late. I need to put the filler on this. It's interesting. Under certain lighting conditions, that flaw is very, very obvious, and under others, it's very hard to see. Yeah, there it's obvious. I'm going to do this first. I'm going to need to tape it so I'm just going to plug away on the things that I said I was going to kind of do today. And then maybe do some, this is like the dashboard. I'll talk about this in a little while. Those are just pieces of trash. I may sort of part it's part of it. What is this about? It's part of it. Part of it is not feeling my best today is that um, I may need to take a break rather abruptly on occasion. Oh, I see. Okay. Now the surface here is less than ideal. Oh, uh, I need to sand the primer off before I put the. I need to remove the primer before I put the filler in. Otherwise, it's not going to adhere very well. It's be even more not good. Well, I'm being seriously incoherent today. I'm going to talk about brakes today, car brakes, and my experience with them, and how not I'm not a mechanic or anything. It's just I'm going to talk about my personal experience with brakes, car brakes over the years. Why am I going to do that? Because I need to talk about something, I guess. Back in the day when there was music, and I didn't have to talk. I could just do things. And you could listen to, you know, good, relaxing music, but that's not happening anymore. We deliberate. It was at first accidental. The There was a software upgrade that didn't happen. I guess that was the filter on the microphone that filtered out all the ambient sounds. And that got disabled. And so I think starting this week, maybe it was last week, I guess maybe last week, the ambient sounds like the water heater and the furnace and other things that make noise, dogs, people walking around upstairs, me dropping things, uh, paint stirrer upper, okay, all of those, all of those sounds were coming through, and decided to decided to just let it continue to not be filtered. When you're hearing noises in the background, that's a deliberate decision. Oh, I'm using up my supply of toothpicks. I need them today. This really pointy one I'm going to use to put contact cement on stuff. This one is for the filler. Okay. Zoom in on this. Zoom. And the flaw is right there where the filler didn't fill it all the way. And either because it shrunk or because, and the divot still remained, or because it got sanded away, I'm not sure. I had a very similar problem with the rearview mirrors on the Lotus Ford race car. The mirrors were also, kind of a large piece of plastic injection molded, and they had divots right in the center of the mirror. So instead of the mirror being like a flat or maybe slightly convex surface, it, it just had a hole in it. And I used this filler, and I ended up having, I think, like five, at least five applications of it before it fully filled it in. And it had, I should say that, a mirror-like surface. It didn't end up being mirror-like. It ended up being, you know, pretty smooth, like the James Webb Telescope or something like that. But pretty, it was okay. Those were chrome plated, those mirrors, and so it was even more challenging because the chrome plating just really interfered. It would have been appropriate for the face of the mirror to be chrome plated, but it could not be salvaged because that is where the flaw was. Just set that off in the box there. Um, I'm going to do this part first because this is a fairly large piece, and it's in the way. It just uses up space. And so what I can do is attach this. Trying to see where the contact points are. Just along the edges. in the bottom here. Oh, well, oh, that's good. It's the whole shelf back here. That's great because I could put contact cement on that and not worry about it getting on everything else. You know, if the bottom even touches. Kind of a little bit. Right along there. And that would be along here. Okay, well, with this then. This is the, let's just say they borrowed a lot of parts from the regular Mustang model, like the interior here, and then modified it to make it look like the GT-350, primarily the the shelf in the back instead of the vestigial little rear seats that came in the real fastback car, and the addition of the tachometer pod, which is the thing that I just put the filler on. Wonder if, you know, if I just put it on the back there, nobody's going to be going in here trying to flip it up. I'm just going to do that instead of trying to get some under here. That could mess things up. I'm going to, you know, if it doesn't work, if it's pulls off, then I can re-cement it. If it doesn't pull off, then it's just fine. I'm talking through my skill level here. Okay. If I were really good at this, I would be putting some cement along the edges here as well to hold this down. But I'm not always that good at it. I know that that shelf is totally obscured. Covered, not obscured, it's covered. It's totally covered. So I can, without fear, put a bunch of it on here. The acrylic paint, the stuff that comes out of the tubes in the bottles, is fairly immune to this, but the spray paint isn't. What I mean by that is that that's a surface that's painted with the brush on paints. The paint doesn't usually dissolve. What am I doing? The paint doesn't usually dissolve. Okay, but this stuff it does, and so if I get this onto the spray painted parts, it'll melt the paint. That's set for a bit. Um, just gonna, well, this is just setting here for a little bit before I attach the parts. Um, this needs to be painted on the top and the bottom. Actually, before I do that, I want to see where it goes. That's this bit here. Goes goes in the engine bay somehow. And that part's in here. I think this is actually the top. It looked like those little prongs were things that fit. Maybe. This picture is really pretty ambiguous, isn't it? But it looks like that's supposed to be the bottom, and this is the bottom. Okay. And then this, oh, I see. Okay. Okay. So this fits along here. There's a little ridge here just below the windshield in the center, and it goes on here and here. And these are like the these are the tops of the what are supposed to be the shock absorbers. Okay. Why is this important? I want to paint the bottom first and then flip it over and paint the top. Now that I know that that's the bottom, I want to put it, I'm actually going to tape it down a little bit like I do with spray painting, because when I brush the paint on, I don't want it moving all over. There's no place to grip it. The whole thing needs to be painted. There's a place for it. And that should hold it well enough so I can brush the paint on. Okay, so that's ready. I'm going to stick this on. I am sticking. It is sticking. It's going to be sticking on. Stick, yay. Okay. So the rear seats in the GT350 were replaced by a shelf where the spare tire sat. And it was covered with this kind of vinyl kind of thing. I hope it was the way this is usually done is that there's like a bolt that goes, big long bolt that goes through the center of the wheel, and it bolts it into, and then there's like a plate, a big washer basically that holds it, that holds the wheel in place. Um, and then you screw it down into the deck so that it doesn't move around, which is important here because um, if you had to hit the brakes really hard, you wouldn't want the spare tire to go flying into the backs of your seats, which are not really well anchored, and folding them forward and kind of crushing you. And at a high speed, spare tires are really quite heavy. They're not just 2 or 3 pounds, or 20 or 30 or more, depending on the weight of the wheel. That hitting at say 70 miles an hour or 90 because you were going way too fast, that would be pretty devastating. That'd be very bad. Okay, well, there's some nice little points here where I can put the cement and not get it on the outside. I'm going to just do that. The contact cement is supposed to go on both sides, and then it sticks to itself. Okay? That's the way it's designed to go. Is But I've discovered that it will just stick also if it's just on one side. And if I get that on here before it sets up, what happens is that it gets onto the other surface and it thinks that there's cement on the other surface. It gets it gets confused that way, and then it holds to its place just like if it were glue. It's, do not want to knock that over. That would be really, really bad. I want to get this pretty close to where it is because if I move it around, the cement could end up showing. There. Yeah, it doesn't fall off either. Okay, so for those of you who say nothing ever happens on this stream, which is kind of true, I did some assembly. I got the tire shelf and the spare tire, uh, the plastic equivalent of what's supposed to look like a covered spare tire attached to the inside of this. Um, the detail that needs to be done that I'm not going to do today because I'm just not feeling like I can pull it off safely is that the window cranks and the door handles, the thing that opens and closes the doors, are inside this thing here. Those need to be painted silver to emulate chrome on both sides. And the pedals are on, pieces of metal like this. Those have to be painted silver. And the real pedals, this will be a challenge. I'm going to try. Were actually metal with a rubber insert. And so when you looked at them, the edges here of the pedals, there's supposed to be a tiny little line of chrome showing. That I don't know if that's going to work or not. If it doesn't, I'll just overpaint. What I may end up doing is, if I can get the outside of the thing metallic, okay, without getting it on the back, if I just show it around the edges, I can use the other flat black paint that I've got, and I can just keep going back and forth until the edges are right. Okay, that's good. So the trick here is to not get the paint when I paint the edges of these petals and this bit here is to not get paint below. Right? If the edge is kind of ragged around the top, I'm going to say that's okay because I can correct that. It doesn't have to be exactly this black. In fact, it could be slightly different, and it will be because I'll be using a different black paint to touch it up, and I'll be going back and forth, iterating until the line is just right. So I just told myself that the real secret here is to get the paint on the top and around the edges. Don't worry about the inside of the pedal. I can take care of that with a different by brushing black paint on it, but don't get silver paint on the, well, whatever that is, the firewall kind of thing. And the same thing is true here, because I want it just on the raised parts here, but not underneath it. Um, I'll look at something here. These are pictures of the real interior of the car. Oh, wow. See look at more than one view. On the inside here, there are armrests. Okay. And the, the, um, the edge of the armrest, the top is black, but the edge of the armrest is actually looks like it's chrome. And but not here. Here you can clearly see, the window crank and the door handle. This lowers and raises the windows. That's how it used to be before there were just buttons that did it electronically. Um, And this is the door handle. You pulled it up and it opened the door. You can see though that in this picture, it's interesting. There's more chrome. There's chrome along the edge of the armrest, and it looks like there's actually a chrome edging around here, which would be this slightly raised bit here. Okay, but in this picture, it isn't there. There isn't any evidence of chrome around here or here. Same thing in this picture, which is a much closer up, and see the door handle and the window crank there behind the steering wheel. But you can also see how the edging works on the pedals. Hmm. Actually, the oh, that's interesting. The pedal has edging on it, but the this part here, the metal thing to which the pedal is attached, is black. It's not chrome. You know, in this picture, which is a lot like this one, because it's the same picture. I don't need two of them. Well, this is the same picture too. I just have a different brightness. Now this is much clearer. Why do I have those? Yeah, this is really clear. Okay. So in this picture, there's metal around the edges of the accelerator pedal, but not the brake and the clutch. But in this one, there's metal edging around the accelerator and the brake and the clutch. I guess these are all just restored cars, and because they've been restored, they're just slightly different. So when I talk about what should be chromed and what shouldn't be chromed, okay, this is a nice clear view of the um, tachometer pod. Okay, and you can see that the bezel around that and the oil pressure, that's an oil pressure gauge. Okay, um, those are chromed, but part is is molded in white plastic, so that has to be painted silver to emulate chrome. And the steering wheel, the center of the steering wheel, is pretty clearly chromed, but it's not. That's molded in white plastic. The painting instructions are bad too. They tell you to paint the wheel, the rim of the wheel black, but all of the pictures show that it was actually wood, that the rim of the steering wheel was wood. So I'll try to do that. And then there's sort of a center medallion. That's going to be a challenge. Okay. So the parts that should have been chromed but aren't, okay, include these little toggle switches down here, these protuberances, the dials for the the radio bezel, okay, the edges around the pod here and around the glove compartment. You can see on all of these pictures that those are chromed and it's molded in white plastic, so it's not. So those, in order to look like this, have to be painted. And I don't have any paint that will, you know, make it look like it's chromed. But I have a silver paint that's shiny and metallic, and so I comes close to it. But then you've got this, okay, with the speedometer and the air temperature, the temperature of the engine, and not really sure what that is. Okay, you can see that the edges and the bit here, those are chromed and the rest of it is black except for the speedometer and numerals. But this whole thing is chromed, this whole part here, which means that these all need to be painted black around the chrome. But then this will look like chrome and none of the rest of this will, okay? Because these aren't chrome. And so what I'm going to do in order to keep the look consistent across here, all these parts here and this part, these parts here, which are not chromed on the model, to keep that look, then I have to be painting them then a metallic silver color. But then it won't look at all like this, which is chromed, and the black paint doesn't adhere to the chrome, so that's going to be next to impossible to do. Is I'm going to just paint over the chrome of this part here. I just paint over that with the primer and paint it all using the silver paint to represent the chrome, especially things like the steering wheel and these. I think these are for like the air vents, okay, and the radio dials. Um, I'm going to do the same actually with the shift lever. This whole thing, this whole thing from the boot up to the lever, the handle itself on the model is chromed, and then one's supposed to paint the top and the bottom black and leave the rest chromed. That's not that's not really, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just overspray it with primer and paint that part in the middle with the silver paint so that the stuff that's supposed to look chrome will all have the same metallic look to it, even though it won't be as shiny as if it were chromed. So this is going to be a lot of fiddly stuff. I've looked at the detail on the tachometer pod, and the dials don't match up with this. The dashboard is not going to look authentic with the painting because they're not they're not molded that well. The little numerals and things aren't going to show. It's going to be sort of like this. You'll be able to tell that there's dials, but you won't be able to very clearly see temp on it or the numbers on the tachometer. Probably won't be able to see the shift pattern on the shift knob either. Just to let you know, there's going to be compromises. Yeah, for the most part, this just has a different texture. I'm just looking at the area where the handles are attached. On one of these, this one, it looks like it's a slightly different color, but you can pretty clearly see here that it's the same black. It just has a different surface texture. And I'm not seeing any real evidence of this being metallic. Well, I'm going to do my best with the interior, but it's going to be kind of, it's going to be a really challenging kind of thing. And these are just too dark uh, and duplicates of some of the things. I was looking for this. I don't need this big piece of cardboard. I can use this little piece of cardboard for this. So eventually, when I get around to doing those things that I talked about just doing, that's what I'll be doing. Is doing the best I can. I'm going to do the best I can to make it look like it should, given the model that I'm working with. Okay. I'm not going to be installing anything more here. So I'm going to put this in the done box for now until I start doing the interior detail painting. But just to show you how this works, this metallic ridge goes on the outside. Is that the seats go here like that? Set there like that. Yeah, yeah. You really can't see the little white spots down below where the spray paint didn't get, but I know they're there, so I'm going to do some touch up on those anyway. Continue to move things around because they're in the way. This is the box of done stuff. And what is done is the bottom of the car. The engine is mounted. Turn it over, you can see the chromed exhaust and the detail on the bottom. Gas tank, differential, dust, white dust particles everywhere. What's with that? It's not dust. Oh, I know. That's where that little bit of contact cement got on once before. Well, it comes off. A little stringy thing there. Pretty much. Trying to get that little white spot off without scraping any of the paint, and it's just not moving. Well, you get to watch me poke at a little white spot here. Okay. Now it's off pretty much. Yeah, so that's the bottom. Okay. And since I've got this out, hmm, I'm just thinking while I had this out, I could see, oh, this attached, but it doesn't attach to this at all. It attaches to another part, which is in another box over there. But this is going in here to get it out of the way and out of the dust. This is pretty much done. You heard that bumped into the microphone there. Okay, this goes on here. The important part is to not put it on upside down like that. Well, the important part is to know which side is right side up. Okay, there, like that. This is the top. And then one of these sides has a radiator cap on it. Um, there it is. It's not very visible, but it's a little raised bit there. That radiator cap needs to be painted metallic, which I am not going to do today. Um, yeah, it's not going to be any harder to paint it here than if I paint it before I attach it. I mean, there's a slight possibility I could get the paint on there. I probably should paint the radiator cap before I attach this, because it minimizes the opportunity for oopsness. Will I be brave? Should I be brave and go ahead and try to do that? I think maybe I will be. This this might be a bad decision. I might be making a poor decision in terms of what I'm doing today. Um, that wouldn't be the first time that happened. I'm not going to use one of the metallics. I'm not going to use the spray paint metallics. They're made for airplanes. I'm going to use metallics here. I don't want it really bright. I want it slightly darker. I'm going to use this chainmail silver. I'm going to put on my head magnifiers, get a bitty brush. And I'm going to attempt to not mess up the top of the radiator by messing up the radiator cap painting. Just see how this works. I was telling myself not to do this sort of thing today, but oh, here, this is the part where I'm going to procrastinate. Yep, goes here like this. It really looks like those should go. This is pins, right? It looks like the little pins should go in those little holes. But they don't line up. And when you look at the picture, it's really obvious that the detail is on the top. These go like this, because those are supposed to be the tops of the shark absorbers. So I don't know why there's holes there. I'm going to have to test fit this as well. Because there are holes there, okay, they show on the bottom here. I don't know if it looks like this all wraps around the engine and the engine compartment and closes it off so you can't see these bits. I don't know that for sure. At some point, I don't know what point, at some point I'll be testing that, test fitting it to see how it goes. So I can tell the engine compartment has to be painted black, okay? But I don't know what's going to show when you flip it over. Is there a headliner? There should be something that attaches to this because that doesn't look very good. No, the body of this car is not great. I'm going to be distracted here for a minute. I'm trying to look. These little side vents. Okay. Those are metallic on the inside and body color on the outside. I looked that up just to be sure. Wasn't any headliner on top of the car there. I guess you're not supposed to see it, but you can look in through the side windows and see it. Um, and it's really flawed. It's got molding. Okay. So if you look up through the windows, if you look through the side windows, you can see the top of the car, right? And what you can see are these circles, okay, which were not part of the original car, and these little prongs. And oh, those are those are like attachment points for the windshield. But I can't let these circles stay there. You can see them from the inside. When you look through when you look through to here, you can see the circles and these little pins. Well, this is supposed to be multicolored. Mustang logo on the side. Mustang. It says Mustang two by two. Oh, good grief. That's not good. Okay, this is just the body shell for the regular fastback car, right? And it's got the logo on the side that says Mustang 2 by 2, but it's not because the rear seats are covered up. What the heck? What did they do with it here? Right behind the rear wheels. Yeah, they did. It's off. It's sanded off. This is right, supposed to be right there. But on the model and on the real car, that's not there. Instead, there's the GT-350 banding that goes along here. So the problem with this is in sanding that off, that's going to change the texture of the plastic where it was sanded, no matter how much I polish it. Um, and so I'm going to have to just sand, I think, the inside of the cove here. Yeah, I'm really curious about what paint they used, like on the door handles. Just those need to be painted. Well, okay. I found more stuff to do with the model, but that has to come off. And then in sanding that off, and I'll polish it and then use the polishing all along the cove here so that it might be a slightly different texture than the rest of the body, but it'll be at least uniform within that because there's no way around it. That logo has to come off. What a pain. This happened with the Lotus Ford race car too. It's supposed to be the 1965 race car, but it's obvious that the model was a slightly modified 1964. It was the same model as the 1964. They just made some slight modifications to it. I guess back in the day, that's the kind of stuff that was done by the model designers. You can hear the buzzing and the rattling of the paint shaker thing, which shakes the paint. And there's a little metal ball in there that breaks up the pigment, helps the stirring up process. At least that's the idea. Well, hopefully I can pull this off. This is the only thing I'm going to do today that's going to require very careful attention to detail. Wow, that's all goofed up paint. It's a technical master modeler's phrase. Goofed up. I didn't get any on my hands. That's kind of a surprise. Okay, well, this is going to make or break the day, right? This is it. Either I can get the radiator cap painted without making it a disaster, or I can't. Well, pretty close. Actually, that'll do. It came out okay. This brush is kind of a mess, though. Some rogue bristles there. Those will be a problem. Checking to see if they get to be coherent or not. What happens is these little bristles pull away from the center of the brush. They're just single bristles, but they catch the paint, and then and as this happens, of course, the brush gets smaller and smaller, which actually isn't all that bad. That's better. I want to leave these on while I put this in. The main source, the main cause of that happening is is putting the brush into the protective sleeve, which is supposed to keep the brush bristles from getting smashed up. But the putting it on and off is usually the main source of smashing it up. Okay, so there's that. Now there's a radiator cap on it. That doesn't look bad. This goes here like that. And you can see what's happening. I'm trying to fit it on there, and it doesn't go exactly where it's supposed to be. That's why I don't use CA glue. Okay, because if I were to do what I just did, which is try to get this in place, and it's off by a 64th of an inch, maybe a 32nd of an inch, and the glue and the cement sets, then it's lost. Like there's a little spot there that needs a touch up. I rubbed the paint off like that. Okay, so yeah, it fits nicely on there if it gets in the right spot. So I'm going to use the contact cement again. I'm going to put it on here just along the edges. Where I'm going to put it is right along the inside edge there where it's supposed to catch it, so it doesn't show on the outside. That is the intent. Now we'll see whether the reality and the intent match each other. You can see what it does to the paint. So I'm going to try the bit. I just stick it on without putting it on both sides. Very much of it. Yeah, I mean it's not falling off. It's the important part. It's on correctly. Means right side up. It's right side up. There's dust on here. And then there was a little white spot somewhere. The radiator cap came out okay. So much just spots of dust everywhere. I thought there was a little white spot. I know what that is. Right down here, there's a little protuberance there. It's like I thought that that was a flaw, but it's not. What that is this is a drain. That little bit there is the drain for the radiator. You turn that and all the liquid pours out. I actually should paint that. I should put a tiny spot. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try it. Nope, I messed up. Nice. Okay, that's what that is. Is that's the drain for the radiator. Put these on. I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, I got the paint not on it, but next to it. It's my failed effort here. I'm trying to clean it off before it dries. Okay, what I was trying to do was get paint right on the little point there. What I succeeded in doing was getting paint around it. But if I do this and I look at what I'm doing, I can do that. Okay, that's not bad. That'll do. Okay, this is little specks of white dust. I'm going to put this in the done box. I keep these because when I do the touch up on the seats, which I'm going to do next, I mean, this is not completely done in that because it's not attached to where it's going, but there, it's in with the other stuff that's mostly done. The seats are going to go in there too, probably. I'm not sure. Um, okay, I'm gonna get the black this black paint out. Go back to this brush and just do the touch up on the seats on the black spots where no one can see it. It bothers me because it's there. Just where the spray paint didn't get on the bottom, or there's a little. It's just a little spot. Um, can't really see it where there's a separation between the metallic part and the seat behind it. Spray paint couldn't get there unless I contorted it in a way that was really difficult. So I'm just going to try to get some black paint in there without getting it on anything else. Yeah, just seeing that this was not painted either. This is supposed to be painted metallic. But I don't know how that will go. Okay. Oh, well, that's going to be totally invisible. Painting these little bits is going to be kind of a challenge. Well, it will. So many little white dust. I'm gonna paint that whole lower bit there. Make sure it's uniform color. Same thing on this side. Uniform gloss. Okay, well, those are touched. Now they've been touched. Yay. Let those dry and then put them in the box with the other stuff. What I will be doing next is painting this piece, which has a name. What is the name of this piece? The brace. It is simply a brace. I should have done this before. I should have done this earlier because it needs to be painted on both sides. If I started with this and painted it right at the beginning of the stream, now, right about now, I could be turning it over and painting the other side. But I didn't. Nope, I didn't do that. Yay me. Yes, that's what I mean. Just getting this into the tube and messing up the bristles with the protector thing that's supposed to keep it from being messed up. Softer. One of these with a lot of bristles on the end. It's very soft because I don't want brush marks. This one's nice and soft. Okay, I'm just gonna sit there for a bit. Um, this paint is sort of glossy, and I want the brace to be kind of glossy, so it kind of so it will show. Doesn't seem to have one of those little metal balls in it. Oh, I'm kind of surprised. I thought I had one for everything. Hmm. Okay, well, let's just black paint on it. It's going to need two coats. See how it looks when it dries. It's kind of viscous. Okay, it's a little jelly-like in its consistency, which means that it's not kind of pulls away from itself as it's being brushed on. Well, once it's dry, I'll take a look at it and see if it needs to be recoated. If it does, that will inform me that when I paint the top, which is the part that really shows, that I need to be a little more cautious with it. And maybe like two thin coats, a base coat, and then another coat on top of it. Sometimes that works out well. If there's a tendency for it to be a little bit uneven in terms of coverage. But as I said, if I had been thinking clearly and planning ahead, I would have done that very early in the stream, an hour ago, and it would be dry now and I could do the other side, but I didn't, and so I can't. And this is just going to have to be somewhere out of the way, maybe in this box. Is there room? Make room. I've got the stock exhaust. That's just trash now. Little thing parts there. This fits right there. I can put the paper towel over it. Can keep moving stuff around. Um, I'm going to clean things up. I have to do a little cleaning here. Things have gotten out of hand. Well, it wasn't really much cleaning up, but I got things moved so that they're. Ugh, I got to get rid of this. All right. I'm going to put these seats in the mostly done box along with where I put, just bring the box over here so you can see that I'm doing something. This is where the radiator went. These seats. I'm not going to install the seats until I paint the pedals and the handles because otherwise they'll be very much in the way. But I'll maybe try to tackle that on Friday. I will try to tackle painting the window cranks and the door handles. Okay. I'm gonna look at the interior. I've got steering column, steering wheel. This is the dash. The tack pod is in here with the filler being filled. This needs to be cleaned up. There's sprue on it, some big pieces down here. But this is where the steering column goes, the steering wheel. But these bits here, along here, the radio dial, tuners, all of that needs to be, what does that say? All of those will need to be fake chromed. I'm afraid that the glove compartment there always says Mustang 2x2 instead of Shelby. Yeah, there's a little Mustang logo on it. Yeah. But the real car has a Carroll Shelby signature facsimile on the glove compartment. This will be kind of a challenge. It's not impossible. These are supposed to be much more visible down here. Those are the AC vents kinds of things. Hmm. Radio dial. This is a combination of highly detailed and not at all. Okay, well, there's flashing a screw on there that needs to come off. Tack pod here. I'm going to, the instrument pod is chromed. I should pull that out because I'm going to attach it and prime it at the same time everything else is primed. And you'll see what I mean when I show it to you. It just doesn't fit very well. The steering wheel and the steering column, those guys can wait until later. I'm going to clean this up, and then I'm going to get the instrument pod out. Maybe I'll get the armrests and the shift lever. I'll do those. Take a look at what I've got. They're little bitty pieces, so I'll keep this out. I'm not really getting to the wheels. I'm just going to set those in here just to get them out of the way. If I'm going to be filing and sanding, I'm going to go ahead and get the instrument pod, the armrests, and the shift. You can find those now. Oh, yeah, those are interesting. Wonder what that is. There's a part there I don't recognize. '64. It looks like the bottles for the window washer fluid. I'll have to find it. 18. Yeah, these are the armrests. So those are little and annoying. 64. Okay, I'll have to look for 64. The steering column. No, I'm not going to do that now. I was going to do the stick shift. No, the stick shift is chromed. That's right. I need to get some chrome parts out with it. Get the chromey thing here. There's the stick shift. The parts of this are supposed to be, yeah, I definitely need to get rid of the chrome because there's well, there's just problems with the the seam shows. The seams are showing. Okay, I'm eh, getting befuddled here. Fuddle-buddled. Okay, I'm gonna take these off for a moment and remove some parts. I want to get these back into the box so I don't mess them up. I want to mess up the parts that I'm going to mess up, which is this and that. That's really way oversized, the stick shift. It is, it's too big. Great. Popping. Yeah. So the decision to dechrome this is a good one, which I will explain in more detail in a minute or 10, or I'll explain when I get to it, which will be sooner than later. Well, it'll be later than now, but it won't be too terribly long from now. And what I'm looking for are the door handles, which I had found earlier. Oh, they're on the part they're up there. I had set it aside there. The armrests. These aren't the door handles. These are armrests. These are just begging to get lost. You can almost hear them go, I want to be lost. That's how nines would say it. I do not ever want to be found again. I want to hop off and fall onto the floor and disappear forever. And those will be fun to clean up. 64. I need to find out what 64 is. I'm very curious now. I think it is the washer fluid bag, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, that's what it is. The washer fluid bag. A and B. What is B? B is silver. Yep. Well, I've got little bitty pieces here. I should do those inside of a box. I'll use this. I know it's all painted on the inside from spray painting paintings. But what I mean by that is that when I'm doing little bitty parts like this, and I'm sanding and filing them, if I do that over a box and I drop it, it hopefully isn't going to go very far. Because it will stay in the box. That's what I want it to do, is just stay in the box. I haven't gotten around to talking about brakes. Oh, so brakes used to be, they're called drum brakes. And on the inside of the wheel, here I can show you this. The inside of the wheel, this was hollow. Okay, the wheels were, round, and they were a round cylinder, and the inside of it was covered in an asbestos-based material. I mean, it really was initially. It was asbestos-based because they would get hot from the friction of applying the brakes. And on the other inside were what were called the shoes, and these were round, so they were arced to match the radius of the inside of the wheel. And when one stepped on the brake pedal, it pushed the shoes outward. So they would be like this. Okay, the wheel out here, and they push out and rub against the inside of the wheel, causing friction, slowing the wheel down. Um, that's how brakes were designed for a very long time. Actually, before that, if you looked like on horse carriages and things of that sort, the brakes were on the outside of the wheel. It was still the same idea. There would be a shoe like that, and when you pulled a lever, and it was all mechanical, there were no power assist or anything. They would push against the outside rim of the wheel, and that's how friction was created, and that would hopefully slow down and stop the wheel from turning and the thing to which it was attached from moving any further. But these drum brakes, which is how brakes were until really then, except for high performance cars or even race cars, that's how you stop the car. They required a good deal of maintenance. The materials then are not what they are now, and so they wore out. actually pretty quickly. The shoes, the arched part that pushed out against the drum, those needed to be replaced probably like once a year, really, if you were in a city using your brakes a lot. They really did. That's far enough, and I'll sand the rest. They were designed to wear out. They were friction. They rubbed against it. So um, yeah, they just abraded away. And so like mufflers, which also needed to be replaced quite frequently then, were places that just specialized in brakes because people were always having to replace the shoes on their brakes. Like I said, if you were in a city driving a lot, like once a year probably. Um, Sometimes the drums they wouldn't wear evenly, and then it would get ridges in it or little indentations, and then the brakes would chatter, because of the unevenness of it the drums pushed out against the when the when the shoes pushed out against the inside of the drum, it would vibrate, and then you get a lot of vibration when you were stopping, and you'd take it in, and they say, "Oh yeah, well, what's wrong here is your shoes are upgraded, but your drums need to be turned." So they take the whole wheel off the car and put it on a lathe and smooth out the inside of it. It was just, metal, and so they were able to keep it going for a while. Sometimes you had to replace the whole thing if you drove the car long enough, which was unusual because they usually rusted out or something huge broke, like the engine or the transmission, so the car was kind of, unrecoverable. That's those will be the bottoms of the, door handles where this is, but and for a long time, the shoes were, like I said, had asbestos in them, and so the people who were working with those were exposed to that all the time, part of their job. There were, springs and levers and things on the inside of the brakes. It was actually possible, because a neighbor of ours did this once, to, do a brake job. That's what it was called, as a brake job back in the day when everything was jobs. It was actually possible to do this yourself, which would save a lot of money, but took an entire day. You have to jack up the car, put it on blocks so it didn't fall down while you were working on it. That's important. You don't want the car to fall down when there's no tire or wheel on it. That is problematic when if that happens, because then sometimes it falls far enough you can't get a jack underneath it again, and then the car is, kind of stuck there, just laying on the ground, not moving. But yeah, we one wheel at a time, jack it up, take the wheel off, expose the brakes, drain the brake fluid. You have to drain the fluid. Otherwise, when take the shoes off, it'll leak all over the place. It's important. after you drain it, it's important to remember to put it back, the brake fluid, kind of an oily substance, hydraulic fluid. Because if you don't, then the brakes won't work. Because when you push the brake pedal, it pushes against the fluid, and the fluid actually is what transmits the force of the brake pedal to the brakes. Drain that, another talk probably just dumped it down the sewer, probably not supposed to, but that and it went through the water treatment plant and polluted the lake. Back in the day, that's what we did. We just dumped everything everywhere. You don't want it, dump it somewhere where it's out of sight. Put it in the garbage, dump it down a sewer, especially a sewer. Sewer was storm water, right? Rainwater. And so the stuff just washed away, in this case, into Lake Michigan without any treatment at all. That's why you would see oil slicks on the water near the shore. People are dumping their brake fluid in it, I guess. Well, yeah, so that. Um, yeah, and all sorts of parts inside, like springs and levers and things that needed to be taken apart. You wanted to save those very carefully because some of them were small, almost as small as this. Um, they were covered in grease to keep them lubricated, and the grease had to come off because it got all dirty, from road grime and stuff. The way those were cleaned was soaking them in gasoline. That sounds great, right? So you got this can of gasoline. It was like usually a coffee can because those were ubiquitous then. There were a lot of coffee cans around. That was good size. And you fill that half up with gasoline and put these parts in and let them soak. And the gasoline was a powerful solvent, and it removed the grease. You had to re-greased with new grease, clean grease, not dirty grease. I'm guessing that the gasoline with all the grease in it just got poured down the sewer too. Where else would it go? Pretty sure that's what happened to it. It was important to remember, how the parts went together. Because once you got the new shoes out of the box, all those parts needed to be put back together the way they were put together the first time. You had to make sure the seals were tight so that the brake fluid didn't leak out. If your brake fluid leaked out and there wasn't any fluid or not enough fluid, then of course the brakes wouldn't work, and that would be a bad thing. Okay, this is looking okay. The question here is, you can see there's this ridge around it, whether that should have a chrome accent on it or not. I'll have to look at the pictures of the interior to see if that is that way or not. Put that in this little box there. I think it took, I don't know if it took the entire weekend or just all day Saturday to get all four brakes done. It was quite a to do, quite a to do. It was quite a, it was a, it took a lot longer than if you just took it to the brake shop where they did these all, one after the other. They had had good tools, and they put it up on a hoist so you wouldn't have to use the jack or worry about it falling off. but yeah, it could be done. And then after it got all the brakes on and everything sealed up so that the brake fluid didn't leak out, then you refill it with the brake fluid. And then you would have to bleed. It's called bleeding the brake lines because air got in. You put the fluid in, but there were bubbles or it didn't, there were voids where air, and you had to get the air out because the brake fluid didn't compress. When you push the brake pedal, it pushed the brake fluid up against the shoes, which pushed out against the drum and stopped the car, hopefully. But if there was air in the line, the air would compress, okay, and you'd have what was called a soft pedal, which means that you push on the brake pedal and the car didn't stop. It wouldn't just go flat to the floor. That was bad. If you didn't have any brake fluid in at all, or if it was really minimal, what was left in the reservoir, um, you step on the pedal and it would just go like no resistance at all. It would just go flat to the floor. A soft pedal showed some resistance, but it was like its name, soft. It would push down much more easily than it should, with much less force, further than it should, and the car might slow down or not. So it was important to get all of the air out of the brake line. There was a little valve, and I could push on the brake pedal, and the valve would open, and it would let the air out, and you'd refill it because the air had volume, right? It took up space, and then you'd put more brake fluid into the reservoir on the top, and you do that a couple of times until the brake felt like it should, and there wasn't any more, you know, dropping of the level in the brake fluid reservoir, and that meant that your brakes should work then, and then you could take the car out and hope for the best. And then if you parked it somewhere, you'd be looking for any signs of brake fluid dripping. And the other thing you do is you check the brake fluid reservoir from time to time to make sure that it wasn't going lower, that brake fluid was leaking out. So you wouldn't want that to happen. So these drum brakes, they didn't stop as well as disc brakes did. That's, but the other thing is that if they got wet, meaning water got into them, okay, the water would act as a lubricant, and when the shoes pushed against the rotors and there was water in the way, just like hydroplaning, okay, or slip and slide, that kind of thing. You know how that works, right? Well, the same thing would happen inside your brakes is that, say you drove through a puddle and it got up over the top of the tires into the wheel, it would just leak into the wheel. You'd step on the brakes and you'd feel the pressure, right? Just it'd feel like it was normal because there was still brake fluid in there and all of that. But the slip and slide effect would happen on the inside of your brakes, and nothing, and it just wouldn't stop. It would be like driving on an icy surface. And so you were told that if you drove through a puddle like that and you had any concern that the inside of your brakes might have gotten water, that what you should do is apply the brakes, whether you wanted to stop or not, especially if you didn't want to stop, because if you did wanna stop and there was water, you wouldn't stop. So you should just do that after you drove through the puddle. And as I was saying before, asbestos was used because the friction caused heat, and the heat would evaporate the water. So you'd wanna do that several times, even if you were in traffic moving along, pull off to the side and just pump your brakes or just apply them, make sure that, the water was out, so when you did wanna stop, it actually would work. You have that problem a little bit with disc brakes, but the discs are exposed. If you look inside your wheels, you look through your wheel, you can see the discs. You can actually usually see the rotor is you can see the rotors, you can also see the pads, that clamp onto the discs. What that means is that if you drive through a puddle that it evaporates quickly, but it's still a good idea to do that because the same thing can happen is if you get water on your rotors, the disc part of the disc brake, um, the brakes aren't gonna work as well until that water is off. So as brakes still wear out because they're friction, so you just have to replace your pads and sometimes your rotors as well, even with the disc brakes, but they last way longer than the drums did because the materials are better and the design is better. So we should all be happy about brakes that work better than they used to. Okay, that's okay. I'm gonna clean the dashboard now. At least they put this on the bottom. That is a screw attachment, but there's a lot of flashing around the edges. It's really quite messy considering that it's a highly visible part of the car. I'm not going to file this all the way down. I'm going to file this most of the way down and then sand it the rest of the way. This is another one of those where the sanding will change the texture. Fortunately, it's on the bottom. Um, so we'll sand the whole thing, not just where the screw is attached. On a lot of cars, the brakes were not power assisted. Power brakes were an option in the 40s and 50s, which is where there was kind of a pump that pumped up the fluid and exaggerated the pressure of the pedal. This is bad here. And so it actually took a fair amount of force, especially in a larger car, um, to apply enough pressure to the brake pedal to stop the car, especially if your brakes were wet, and you had to push them especially hard for them to engage, or if they were worn. It was actually possible to do that. The shoes, had this sort of semi-abrasive asbestos containing material to cause friction against the inside of the drums. That could wear away, and then you would just have metal rubbing on metal, which made a horrible screeching noise and was not very effective. That can still happen with disc brakes because the pads, they really are pads, um, are material that no longer has asbestos, I don't think, but an abrasive material, just like the shoes on drum brakes, the pads on disc brakes have an abrasive material like that. And it's really tempting to just break that off, but that would leave a divot that would have to be filled in. And that can wear away to the point where there isn't any of that on anymore, and the metal backing starts rubbing against the metal of the rotors. I pretty much had that happen on one of my vehicles pretty recently. Is and so the rotors needed to be replaced anyway because they were getting kind of, you know, they're all subject to friction as well, intentionally abraded. This is just a really annoying amount of screw attached to the bottom of this in a place that's really pretty annoying. Not even, it's not a flat surface, it's one of these rounded bits. It's not attached in just a small spot. It's a big chunk of plastic there. It needs to not be worn down, but then shaped to the shape of the thing to which it is attached. Yeah, and so that made a really high pitched squealing noise. It was saying it was quite unhappy rubbing metal against metal like that. But back in the day with the drum brakes, that would have been not only very noisy but also a problem because then the car wouldn't stop. I think, I'm not sure when disc brakes came out. I know that they were not standard on cars, regular passenger cars. They came out on racing cars and sports cars, high-end sports cars. Um, because they're just more effective at stopping, and they didn't heat up quite as much because they were exposed to the air, the you know that, and I remember I think it was sometime in the 60s that you could get disc brakes as an option, and usually, if I'm remembering correctly, it was only on the front wheels when disc brakes became kind of standard, which means that they would come without having to say that you wanted them as a special order. They were front wheel disc brakes, and you usually couldn't even get them on the rear wheels. Four-wheel disc brakes, that was a big deal, not just on sporty cars like Camaros and Mustangs and things like that. They weren't really sports cars, they were sporty cars. It's finally shaping up. Four-wheel disc brakes were really pretty rare. I think until the late 60s, maybe even early 70s. Now, now drum brakes don't even exist anymore. I don't remember when they disappeared, but at some point they just disappeared. They didn't. Nobody used them on cars anymore. I've got all these little bits of sandpaper here. Just sanding off the screw on this bit here, getting it even with the rest of the bottom, and then sand the whole thing to get uniform texture on the plastic along the whole bottom here like that. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna pretty much just get this done. Yeah, this took a long time, didn't it? Sanding down little bits to get them up always takes a long time. Yeah, I'm told, and I've seen them that we actually have one. It's kind of a rotary tool that theoretically would make this much faster, but also theoretically would just chew up the surface. And what I mean by that is that it would abrade so quickly that I would not keep it under control, and it would destroy it. It would destroy the surface by putting gouges in it. And that would be unhelpful. It wouldn't be helpful to have it all gouged up. So along the edge here, this is where it came out of the mold. They're just flashing, which is little bits of plastic that oozed out between the two halves of the mold. And that keeps the parts from fitting, and it looks ugly. And it shouldn't be there. I am sanding it away, sanding it off the part. Well, that's the short story of brakes as I remember them. I thought there'd be more to it. I, I really did. I expected there to be more to say about brakes, but it turned out that there really wasn't, I guess. Like I said, I remember watching someone break this off. Oh, I used to do it when I was a youth. A youth is that we have a single edge razor blade and just scrape it off. And didn't use sandpaper then. I think I just didn't think about using it. I was in a hurry. Scraped it off, and then it was off. So now brakes are much more reliable. They last a lot longer. They're fairly expensive to maintain. You have to replace, and you're going to eventually have to replace the pads and at some point the rotors as well, because by by their very function, they just wear out because it's friction rubbing against parts, rubbing against parts. And when that happens, then they wear away. That's part of the friction bit. Can't avoid it because that's what friction does. Is it wears them out, erodes them. Well, I have to apologize for the story of brakes not taking longer. I suppose I could talk more about brakes, but when the disc brakes came out and you could get them as an option, fairly expensive option on the front wheels of cars, that was a big step forward. And then eventually front wheel disc brakes became a standard thing. They put them on all the cars. It became a big advertising thing because, ooh, disc brakes. Wow, that's really cool. That's just like a race car or a sports car on just your regular car. And then four-wheel disc brakes became the standard. It just became what everything was. I don't understand this part. I'll have to test fit this to see if that's just excess plastic or not, because the other side doesn't have that big ridge on it. Top of this polishing paper. Checking to feel if I can feel any of the flashing still on there. I think I got it pretty well. This in here. That paint dry enough to paint the other side? No. I'm gonna have to wait until Friday to paint the rest of that. Probably remember to do that. Okay. So this is chrome plated, and there's lots of problems with that. Well, it's way too long for one thing, but if you can see it, there's a seam. I mean, the seam sticks out really badly, and there's no way to deal with that, to get rid of it without getting rid of the chrome plating. But I want to get rid of the chrome plating anyway, because this has to be painted black, and the paint isn't going to adhere to it. I don't want a seam all around the edge of my shift lever, which there is. Okay. And it goes down into the boot where the shift lever attaches, where it covers up the attachment. I'm pretty much just going to get the chrome plating off, and then I'm going to prime this and paint it the same silver color that I'll be painting the rest of the stuff. That's kind of chromy, which is like the bezels of the tachometer and the door handles and things like that. On the top of this is supposed to be the shift pattern, but it's not. It's not even. It's got they call it the flashing. The, the seam, the seam is showing. I'm not getting all the chrome off, but a lot of it. And then this will get primed and painted like all the rest of the stuff gets primed and painted. I like to get the chrome off the bottom part there because it has to be painted black. It's going to be difficult to do. No, it's not even lined up. Look at that. It's really poorly made. Okay, so trying to sand this without breaking it. You can see I'm trying but not succeeding. Clingy bit, yeah, where the chrome clings like that, that usually indicates an irregularity in the plastic. What's up with the top of the shifter there? The shifters were bigger on the top than on the bottom. And this is exactly the opposite. It tapers at the top. It isn't how it really is done. I'm going to reshape this. I know it's just wrong, and it won't end up being perfect, but at least it's not such a weird inverted cone shape that it was. Very, very odd. Okay, now down on the boot here, it's a little bit hard to see, but it's really not good. It's all kind of ridged like this, but there's this not just a sprue attached here, but there's a seam. The seam shows every little step of the way here. In some ways, the shininess of the chrome, I found this makes it difficult to see these flaws in the mold. But then when it's painted, even if it's painted black, then they glare, they jump out. I don't really want to be using a file on this, but I can't. The sandpaper won't work. And the faces are so small that scratch marks probably are not going to show. When you look at it from the bottom, you can see that they did not line up, and the bottom is not flat, so it means it's not going to set right when it's assembled. Just unhappy about chrome parts. The Lotus Ford, which in real life was not chromed, had all sorts of chrome parts, including the driver. It's pretty weird, and that took a lot of dechroming to make it possible to put that together. I think I'm getting those ridges out of the way. Yeah, still a little bit there. Pretty annoyed at you, Monogram. Well, the more of this I can get off, the more likely I'll have a uniform looking stick shift lever here. Okay, well, this is close to being adequate. Clean this. Try to get it off the sides. I can do that without messing it up. I'm pretty much getting to the point. I'm just going to leave it and hope that the primer covers and that it doesn't flake off too much when it's painted. shift knob is still weird. Badly made monogram. Badly made. These all need to be cleaned at some point. This bit here is the dash, and you can see that, you know, the speedometer has detail and all. There's actually a lot of detail in there that just gets totally lost in the shininess of it. Um, yeah. So this is going to get primed, and then I'm going to attempt to paint it so that some of it will show. It's going to be quite a challenge to make this look decent. You know, get the speedometer numbers and because they're on there. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. Maybe with a little felt tip pen. I've had some success doing that. It's not going to show, but I want it to be flat. I'm going to test with this in the dashboard. I'm kind of curious to see how well it fits. And I'm probably going to say, well, why didn't they just mold this in to begin with instead of pretending that there should be some chrome showing here? Just annoying. Yeah, this is the flashing around the edges mold, and it got covered in chrome, so this all would have had to have been, yeah, yeah. So this goes in here like this. Yeah, and it fits okay. It'll be okay. I'm actually going to attach that in here and then prime it all at the same time. And then this has to be painted chrome around here, and then chrome bits here, 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 here. Okay, and then try to paint this. That's in the way. That will make it hard. Should I try to paint this? I'm talking about this protuberance where the steering wheel goes on makes it hard to get into those spots in there. But on the other hand, if I paint this and then attach it later, it's really hard to hold on to this. I might attempt to paint it and then install it. I think I'm actually going to do that. I'm taking the chrome plating off around the edges. I'm gonna be wrapping up here. I thought I might actually end up finishing early today because I didn't have that much to do, but as usual, I didn't get very much done, but I took a long time to do it. Held that up, held up that standard. Okay. Yeah, these are little bits that could get lost. I'm gonna stick them in the box here instead of just letting them lay around here. This is the part that got painted glossy, and it's really not. I'll let it dry until Friday. I might need to put a second coat on that. I think I might just to see how it looks before I paint the top. Yeah, I'm gonna second coat that early in the stream, see how it looks, and then flip it over and put two coats on the other side. Well, I did some stuff today, not a whole lot. Um, I did a little bit of assembly. I put the spare tire shelf and the spare tire into the body of the car. Um, I touched up the paint on the seats. I got those parts out and prepped them so that they can be primed and painted sometime in the future. Got sanding dust all over the inside of this box. But I didn't lose the pieces, so that it served its purpose. Um, yeah, so there, stuff was done. Pieces of cardboard are floating around all over the place, getting in the way. I've got duplicates of the pictures of the inside of the car. Here, put this box over here. You can see parts. There, you can see parts there. I put more filler on there, and I can be sanded on Friday. I got stuff to do on Friday, so I will do things on Friday. Maybe I'll get the chrome wheels out. Maybe I'll play around with the tires. I don't know. I'm thinking Friday. I will once again get practically nothing done. I'll take a good long time to do it and just see how progress goes. I might giving the impression of getting stuck. Um, but a lot of it depends on how painting the trim goes. Painting the window crank and the door handle on the inside of the car. Painting those little details, the edges of the pedals, that sort of thing. A lot of that depends on a lot of what happens next will depend on how that goes. But I know it's a little bit early, but I'm going to sign off. Nobody was in chat today. Hoping the chat is working. I'm not sure. I'll be back Friday with some more car stuff, or maybe we'll get back to the Fink if the car stuff gets in a place where it's just sort of stuck. Thanks. See you then.